All right, welcome back. This is part two of our lecture on test validity. And we had just finished talking about content validity. So we're going to move on and talk about two other different kinds of validity. The next one is one that technically isn't, we don't technically count it as a type of validity, but it's an important thing to talk about. You're going to encounter it probably on the comp review exam, maybe on the GRE. It just seems like a popular concept to ask about, so I'm going to go ahead and mention it. And that is the concept of face validity. So you've heard the expression on the face of it, and that usually means just on the surface from the looks of it. So face validity, even though it's not considered a real measure of validity, it's important for people taking the tests because it looks at whether test items appear to measure what they're supposed to. So does the test appear to measure whatever the concept it is? And do the test items look like they belong on the test? Does it look valid to test users? And you ask, why is this important? And it's mostly because of a motivation for people taking the test. We want them to barking, so I had to go and deal with them. Yeah, so the face validity mostly is due to motivation because if a test is asking about things that don't seem to belong, test users aren't going to take it seriously. So it's critical for that part. Users might get angry, they might get discouraged, they might not perform as well as they should, they might doubt the utility of psychological testing. But you also don't want to make test items so obviously relevant that people might introduce what we call response sets. So that means, as we've talked about, social desirability, faking bad. For example, if it's if you think about the MMPI, the test, if you give it to someone who is thinking about pleading insanity or someone who's thinking about trying to claim incompetency to stand trial, there are questions on there that say, I hear voices and I have bizarre thoughts. Well, they might answer yes to that because it's obvious what the test is looking for. So it's a tricky balance, but face validity is just a concept I want you to understand a bit. So the other type of validity we're going to talk about here before we get back to class is construct validity. So this is the most difficult and elusive validity type. It's very difficult to achieve, but it's also I would certainly put it up there as one of the most important. First thing we have to do is talk about what a construct is. So a construct is this intangible quality that we can't see or touch. Usually it's something theoretical, it's a way that individuals differ. So, intelligence is a good example of a construct. Personality characteristics, for example, compassion is considered to be a construct. So, these are things that can't be measured directly. So, I can't. I have no way we don't have a blood test for intelligence or IQ. The only way we can measure constructs are through behaviors that reflect it. So, for example, things that reflect intelligence would be problem solving, vocabulary grasp, memory. Those would be behaviors that we can measure. Another example of a construct might be leadership ability. We can't see leadership ability, but we can measure things that reflect it, like respect from employees or assertiveness. So, one of the reasons why construct validity is difficult to attain is because we have to figure out, okay, what behaviors can we measure that would reflect whatever that construct is? So, the first step is that psychologists have to identify the behaviors that reflect the construct and then develop tests of those behaviors. So, the intelligence test measures things like problem solving and memory and practical kinds of knowledge, and it's all done to assume that that measures intelligence. So, the way to think about it is that constructs are inferred from behavior, they're assumed. So we assume if you have a good memory and good problem solving skills, you must be intelligent. But we also know the construct is more than just the behavior. So intelligence is more than just, do you have a good vocabulary? It's more than just, are you good at solving problems? So constructs are inferred from behavior, but no single behavior is enough to validate the existence of the construct. And a good example I want to give you here is the construct of psychopathy. So psychopathy is a characteristic. It's a personality character kind of trait that people have when they take advantage of other people. They hurt and take advantage of other people, and they don't care. So we can't really measure psychopathy directly, but we can measure certain behaviors, impulsive behaviors. That's characteristic of psychopathy. Not feeling guilty when they hurt people. That's characteristic. And then antisocial behavior are just behaviors where they hurt other people, and they have an attitude of being really condescending toward other people. So that's an example. If you can measure all of those characteristics, then it's assumed that your test is measuring the construct of psychopathy. So to put this all together, construct validity asks, does the test measure the complex, multifaceted, theory-bound attribute that it claims to measure? So constructs are complex, so think about intelligence. It's multifaceted, it's bound to intelligence theory, and that's actually going to be one of the next chapters that we cover. So construct validity is pretty complicated. And I put this picture here. This is my little boy. He was about, I don't know, a year, little over maybe 18 months, something like that. And he loved to take things apart. So one thing I would do would be to go to Goodwill and just buy, these toys for 50 cents. And he would ask us to take them apart. And we always supervised him. He never put anything in his mouth, anything like that. We made sure it was safe and we cleaned it all up. But my husband was excited because he said, "Oh, he's going to be an engineer. Engineers love to take things apart." So, an engineering aptitude is a example of a construct. And so this behavior is just one example. It's just one of the facets of that construct of kind of that engineering mindset. Another example here might be physical fitness. Physical fitness is a construct. It includes strength, cardiovascular fitness, flexibility. So, does the test that we have of physical fitness measure all of those things? And if it does, then we could say there's a pretty good chance that that test has construct validity. So, to measure construct validity, it's a little bit of a process. And we're not going to be actually doing this in class or a lab, but it's important to understand for part of this class. So, the first thing you want to do to establish construct validity is think about all the behaviors that go along with the presence of the construct. So, when we talk about IQ, okay, good problem solving ability, a good memory, a good vocabulary, those would be behaviors that are consistent with the presence of intelligence. If we're looking at the construct of depression, things like crying, feeling hopeless, feeling helpless, low self esteem, those would be behaviors consistent with the presence of that. Then you want to list behaviors that are inconsistent with the presence of the construct. So think about behaviors that don't go along with intelligence. It would be things like a poor memory, although people can have poor memories and be highly intelligent, but a weak vocabulary, a lack of problem solving skills, kind of the opposite of the first one that we just did. For something like depression, having hopefulness. If a person has the characteristic of hopefulness, that doesn't typically go hand in hand with depression. So we make two lists of behaviors and then we measure them both to try and establish this. So construct validity is going to include something called convergent validity, where the test that we have come up with is going to correlate highly with others measuring the same construct. If you have a new test that measures depression, we're going to want to give people your test along with some other standard tests of depression, the Beck Depression Inventory, the Beck Hopelessness Scale. So if people score high on your new test of depression and score high on these, we say that your test has convergent validity, which is part of construct validity. So if I can go back, this is that first part here. That measures behaviors consistent with the presence of the construct. So convergent validity is the first part of construct validity. The second thing you're going to want to look at is a type of validity called discriminant validity, and this measures the second part of this. It is also sometimes called divergent validity, and here we want to see if the test does not correlate, the new test that you come up with does not correlate with tests from which it should differ. So for depression, scores on your depression scale should have no correlation whatsoever with intelligence tests because depression and intelligence are not related. So that's one way to think about it. Introversion, extroversion. Depression is not related to introversion, extroversion. But if your test ends up being related to intelligence or introversion and extroversion, then your test might not be measuring depression. So there's two different things that you want to do to find construct validity. You want to establish convergent validity. So does your test correlate with things that it should? And then discriminant validity, we want to see whether your test does not correlate with things that it is not supposed to. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. These are concepts that we've just talked about that are probably somewhat new to you. I really want to encourage you, if you have to go back and watch the video or look at the slides again to understand it a little bit more, read these sections in your textbook to go along with this. And then when we get back to class next Wednesday after fall break, I'll go over this. I'm not going to re-lecture on it, but I'll answer questions and maybe give a couple other examples. But these two videos together should serve as the replacement for class that we would have had on Friday. All right, that's it. Hope you all have a great break.